This is round 19 in the Sunday morning prelims at the 2019 NAQT High School National Championship Tournament. This game pits the 109 card against the 138 card for a spot in the playoffs. From New Jersey, we have Middlesex County Academy, and from Illinois, we have Macomb. Both teams are ready to go. Best of luck to both teams. Here's toss-up 1. A person is forced to undergo this process in the Pashtun tradition of Vani as punishment for a relative's crime. In the Japanese... Yes?
Stoning.
Nick 5. In the Japanese tradition of Miai, a person known as a Nakoto introduces potential participants in this process who then meet 3 times. A lavender version of this process was used to disguise a participant's homosexuality. For 10 points, name this process that might involve the payment of a dowry. Yes?
Marriage.
10. Bonus. Charles Mingus recorded a version of this song combined with Jimmy McHugh's similar tune, Exactly Like You. For 10 points each, the lyrics of what jazz standard describe public transportation that goes to Sugar Hill way up in Harlem?
Take the A train.
Which was the signature tune of this jazz pianist named Duke. It was inspired by written directions to his home.
Ellington.
This frequent collaborator with Ellington wrote the music to Take the A Train.
Do we know? Coltrane.
No, Billy Strayhorn. 20 points, toss up 2. In a scintillator, this effect produces an edge in the spectrum of energy lost by gamma rays. The distortion of the cosmic microwave background in galaxy clusters is due to an inverse form of this effect. The energy lost in this process is proportional to 1 minus the cosine of the scattering angle. Yes?
Compton.
10, bonus.
Good catch.
Sorry?
What was it?
Compton.
Compton.
Compton scattering. Could you speak up a little bit more for me, please?
Yes.
Thank
Also,
you.
this fuzzy thing is missing.
I know. Don't worry about it. Could you speak up just a little bit more for me, please? Thank you. Bonus. Atresia of this structure leads to a double bubble sign on the X-ray. For 10 points each, named as part of the small intestine that is closest to the stomach.
Pylorus.
No, it's some
Answer?
Pylorus.
The duodenum.
Oh,
The duodenal atresia is common in sufferers of this developmental condition caused by having 3 copies of chromosome 21.
Down syndrome. Down syndrome.
One way to diagnose duodenal atresia in utero is finding the polyhydramnios, or elevated levels, of this substance.
Do we know?
Hemoglobin.
Hemoglobin.
Amniotic fluid. 10 points, toss up 3. This king was served by 5 ministers whose titles collectively formed the acronym Cabal. During this king's reign, the exclusion crisis prompted the initial divide between the Whigs and Tories. This merry monarch had no children by his wife Catherine of Braganza, but several with mistresses such as Nell Gwyn. James II succeeded. For 10 points, what English king who was restored to the throne and yes?
Charles
Prompt?
Charles the Second.
For 10. Bonus. This novel's protagonist chooses to loaf around Europe rather than become a businessman in Chicago, prompting Isabel Bradley to end their engagement. For 10 points each, name this novel in which Larry Darrell discovers the spiritual benefits of meditation.
I don't know. Siddhartha.
The Razor's Edge, which is by this British author of Human Bondage.
Smith.
Mom's novel Cakes and Ale takes its title from the Shakespeare comedy in which the twins Viola and Sebastian are separated in a shipwreck.
12th Night.
That's 10. Toss up 4. In this novel, an old woman who lives on rabbits and chickens is found dead holding a set of keys. A man with a black eye patch in this novel hides under bed covers to listen to a radio. A car thief in this novel dies after being kicked with a stiletto heel by a girl with dark glasses. The doctor's wife is the only one not affected by the title White Sickness. Yes?
Blindness.
10. Bonus. For 10 points each, answer the following about man-made famines in the USSR. The 1932 Soviet famine was caused in part by the forced collectivization of agriculture and the liquidation of this class of land-owning peasants whom Stalin accused of refusing to relinquish their grain reserves.
I don't think so. Kulaks. Say that.
Yeah.
Kulaks.
Concurrent with the 1932 Soviet famine, the Holodomor was a genocidal famine the USSR created in this country, whose cities include Kiev.
Ukraine.
Hermann Goering's green folder contained documents outlining the scheme masterminded by Hermann Baca to feed the Wehrmacht after Operation Barbarossa by deliberately starving the Soviet populace.
Do we know? No.
The Hunger Plan. 10 points, toss up 5. This quantity is reduced 4-fold by the replacement of an alpha hydrogen with deuterium in the Hoffman elimination. The number of terms in the product used to calculate this quantity depends on the molecularity. The height of the transition state inversely yes?
Activation energy.
Neg 5. Inversely coordinates with this quantity expressed in units of molarity per second. For 10 points, what quantity increases when activation energy is lowered by catalysts? Yes?
Rate.
10. Bonus. In March 2019, this country's port of Beira was almost entirely destroyed by Cyclone Idai. For 10 points each, name this coastal African country whose capital is Maputo.
Oh, this always comes up.
I don't know. Liberia.
Mozambique, whose southern city of Xai-Xai is at the mouth of this river, whose crocodile and Oliphant's tributaries rise in Kruger National Park. Rudyard Kipling described it as great, gray green, and greasy.
I don't think it's orange, maybe?
Orange.
The Limpopo, northern Mozambique, borders this lake whose main outflow is the Shire River. It's sometimes called Lake Nyassa.
Do we know?
Tana, maybe?
Tana.
Lake Malawi, nothing on the
sorry.
bonus, toss up 6. This saint and St. Jude are said to have brought Christianity to Armenia. An annual August 24th festival in London that was named for the saint is the title setting of a Ben Jonson play, an event named after, yes,
Bartholomew.
15. Bonus. One character in this novel attempts to seduce Zamanek's wife Helena as a form of revenge. For 10 points each, name this Czech novel in which Ludwig is expelled from the Communist Party for writing optimism is the opium of mankind on a postcard.
Unbearable lightness of being.
The Joke. This author of The Joke depicted the relationship between Tomasz and Teresa in his novel The Unbearable Lightness
Kundera.
of Being. In the 7-part novel by Kundera, a literary student attends a gathering of eminent poets and attempts to convince Christina to sleep with him in a section titled for the untranslatable word litost.
Do we know? No.
The Book of Laughter and Forgetting, 10 points, toss up 7. One of this author's protagonists pits Reno Starkey and Pete the Finn against each other to regain control of Personville, which the locals call Poisonville. This author, whose longtime partner was Lillian Hellman, wrote a novel in which Bridget O'Shaughnessy hires the hard-boiled detective Sam Spade to track down a black statuette of a bird. For 10 points, name this author of Red Harvest. Yes.
Hammett.
10. Bonus. This treaty was signed 15 years after the Treaty of Alcaçovas. For 10 points each, what 1494 treaty used the Cap Verde Islands to establish a line of demarcation dividing the New
Tordesillas,
World
right?
between
Yeah.
Spain and
Tordesillas.
Yes. The parties to the Treaty of Tordesillas were Ferdinand and Isabella of Spain, and this Portuguese king. After his death, he was given the epithet Perfect Prince.
Do we know? Henry.
John II. This decadent Borgia Pope's 1493 bull, Enter Caetera, served as the basis for the Treaty of Tordesillas.
Do we know? Boniface 16.
Alexander VI, 10 points, toss up 8. This state's town of Times Beach was one of the first EPA Superfund sites since dioxin. Yes.
New Jersey.
Neg 5. Since dioxin-contaminated oil was sprayed on its roads in the 1970s, most of the lead mined in the U.S. comes from the polluted lead belt in the state's St. Francis Mountains, west of New Madrid. The tourist destination of Branson lies within the state's forested Ozarks. For 10 points, what Midwestern state is between Illinois and Kansas? Yes.
Missouri.
10. Bonus. The Xiaobao style of this martial art makes great use of sweeping leg kicks. For 10 points each, name this martial art whose Western practitioners focus on its slow, deliberate movements.
Tai Chi, right?
Yeah.
Tai Chi.
With the fluid motions of Tai Chi inspired the movements of waterbenders on this Nickelodeon cartoon about Aang, which ran for
Say
3
that.
seasons.
Avatar: The Last Airbender.
The earliest style of Tai Chi was developed by Chen Wangting, a 17th century general of this Chinese dynasty led by rulers such as the Yongle Emperor.
We gotta get something.
Sure. Ching.
Ming. 20 points, toss up 9. A musical work in this genre begins with the right hand playing B, then 2 Bs an octave higher, while the left plays E minor block chords. Hans von Bülow gave a difficult B flat minor one of these works the nicknamed Hades. A constantly repeated A flat led one of these works to be nicknamed Raindrop. Frederick Chopin's Opus 28 yes.
Waltz.
Neg 5
okay.
contains 24 of, for 10 points, what works that, despite their name, do not precede anything. Go ahead.
Prelude.
For 10, bonus.
Fine.
Say that again, please.
Prelude.
Yes. 10. The common name of this buffer zone may come from the color of British General Peter Young's pen. For 10 points each, name this de facto border that was created in 1974 after the end of Operation Attila.
Like India, Bangladesh line?
Answer?
India, Bangladesh.
No, the Green Line. Since the 1974 Turkish invasion, the Green Line has passed through this capital of Cyprus.
Cyprus is capital. No.
Nicosia, a common meeting place in the buffer zone, is the Ledra Palace, which was formerly an establishment of this type. The Waldorf Astoria is one of these establishments in Manhattan.
Hotel? You say hotel?
Yeah, that's 10. Toss up 10. One of these events occurred when Renzo de Seri and his Landsknechts mutinied in 1527. Norman soldiers under Robert Guiscard responded to a 1084 citizens' rebellion by carrying out one of these events. In 387 BC, the Senones' chief Brennus commanded one of these events, which, yes,
Like a sack?
prompt.
Sack of Rome?
Yes, for 10. Bonus? For 10 points each, answer these questions about galaxies. The nearest large galaxy to the Milky Way is what galaxy located in a namesake constellation found next to Cassiopeia in the night sky?
Andromeda.
Yes, Andromeda is the largest member of what group of about 50 galaxies whose second largest member is the Milky Way?
This is like the, I forgot. This is
The new galaxies.
Answer?
The new galaxies.
The local group is part of this supercluster, which is around 100 million light years wide and contains...
it's Virgo.
That's 20. Toss up 11. Transcripts of an investigation into this process included the boast, I made him a long snapper. Mark Riddell collaborated with the Key Worldwide Foundation run by William Singer on a scheme involving this process. Hallmark put Garage Sale Mystery on hiatus after charges over this process were filed against Lori Laughlin. A 2019 yes.
College admissions.
10. Bonus. One of these texts was transmitted by Ananda, who recited it from memory. For 10 points each, what set of 3 texts, 2 of which are the Vinaya and the Abhidhamma, has a name reflecting the receptacles used for its storage?
Like jars.
Say that.
Jars.
No, it's the Tripitaka, or three baskets. The Tripitaka comprises the entire scriptural canon of the Theravada branch of this religion.
Buddhism, right? Buddhism? Buddhism?
The third member of the Tripitaka is named for being this type of text, whose name translates to English as string. Two prominent ones in Mahayana Buddhism are named Diamond and Heart.
Sutra.
That's 20. That's the half.
Okay, we gotta keep going.
If you are uncomfortable wearing that, you can put it on the table in front of you.
What?
If you are uncomfortable wearing that, you can just put it down on the table in front of you. What?
When I buzz in, I just.
Yeah, no, keep going.
Don't worry about it. I don't want that to distract you from playing Quiz Bowl. Okay? You understand what I'm saying? This game is much more important than that. If you lay on the table there, it will pick you up just fine. At the half, the score is 55 for Middlesex County Academy, 190 for Macomb, and this is toss-up 12. George Gamow showed that a quantity named for this law of physics can be bypassed via quantum tunneling. That quantity is the potential energy barrier to nuclear fusion. This law's namesake constant equals 1 over 4 pi times the permittivity, yes,
Gauss?
Neg 5, times the permittivity of free space. Gauss's law for electricity is equivalent to, for 10 points, what inverse square law for the force between two static charges named for a Frenchman? Yes?
Coulomb's law.
10 bonus. The EU threatens sanctions over this country's plan to increase logging in its old-growth Bielorussia forest for 10 points each, in this country with the highest level of environmental pollution in Europe due to its use of coal in Krakow and Warsaw.
Poland.
Yes. EU officials criticized Poland's attempts to subsidize mining operations in Silesia, a coal-rich region located along this river that partly forms the Polish-German border.
I think it's the Danube.
The Oder, this right-wing ruling party of Poland led by Beata Szydło, successfully campaigned in 2015 on a platform of protecting coal mining jobs.
PD.
Say that again, please?
PD?
No, it's the Law and Justice Party, or PIS. 10 points, toss-up 13. For this film, Urge Overkill covered Neil Diamond's Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon. A passage in this film describing furious anger is identified as Ezekiel 25:17. 666 is the combination to a briefcase in this film whose glowing contents are... yes?
Pulp Fiction.
10, bonus. Paul Mueller received the 1948 Nobel Prize in Chemistry for developing this compound. For 10 points each, this pesticide used in large-scale malaria and typhus elimination efforts in the 1940s and 50s.
Yeah, try.
When I?
DDT. In this 1962 book, Rachel Carson exposed the devastating...
Sonic Spring.
Sorry?
Sonic
Yes. DDT contributed to the endangerment of the peregrine falcon because it inhibited a calcium transporter protein, causing this effect, which in turn led to low birth rates.
Like eggshell thinning? Eggshell thinning?
That's 20. Toss up 14. One character in this novel thinks he suffers from déjà vu, jamais vu, or presque vu after seeing a man sitting naked in a tree. Characters in this novel are angered by Scheisskopf's demand for constant marching. This novel is mostly set on the island of Pianosa. Colonel, yes?
22.
10 bonus. Pencil and paper ready. For 10 points each, answer these questions about the number 1,197. What is the units digit of the number equal to the cube of 1,197?
Good 9, right?
Sure.
9.
3. What is the units digit of the number equal to 1,197 factorial?
Do you know?
No.
5.
0. What is the largest prime factor of 1,197? You have 10 seconds and should note that 1,197 is equal to 3 times 339.
So, like, not 9.
It's gotta be an odd number.
7.
19.
Sorry.
Nothing on the bonus, toss up 15. This man warned France of an agonizing reappraisal of U.S. foreign policy if the EDC treaty was not approved. This man's support for agreements such as the ANZUS treaty was jokingly called pactomania. This cabinet official endorsed coups in Guatemala and Iran, brought about by an agency run by his brother Alan for 10... Yes? Time, neg 5. By his brother Alan for 10 points, named this man who served as the first Secretary of State under Dwight Eisenhower. Yes?
Dulles.
Dulles for 10. This group's name was inspired by a location near its first meeting in Fort Erie, Ohio. For 10 points each, named a civil rights movement co-founded by William Monroe Trotter and W.E.B. Du Bois.
Oh, shoot.
NAACP, no.
Sure. NAACP.
The Niagara Movement. The Niagara Movement challenged the ideas of this author of Up From Slavery, who was based at the Tuskegee Institute.
Washington, right?
Yes.
Washington.
An early critic of the Niagara Movement was a former slave named Archibald who had this surname. A relative of Archibald who was born with this surname wrote the abolitionist Appeal to the Christian Women of the South.
I don't know. Smith.
Grimke, 10 points, toss up 16. The rank nullity theorem relates the dimensions of this type of function's kernel, image, and domain. This kind of function must preserve addition and scalar multiplication. A mapping with this property between finite dimensional vector spaces can be represented as a matrix. Thus, matrix equations can be used to solve systems of these equations. Yes?
Polynomials.
Neg 5. For
Sorry.
10 points, what kind of function is a polynomial with degree 1? Yes? 10 bonus.
Sorry.
In this play, Carl Linder offers thousands of dollars to stop a family from purchasing a house near his for 10 points each. In this 1959 play in which Willie skips town with money that beneath his father Walter. This African-American playwright wrote A Raisin in the Sun.
Hansberry.
Yes, Beneatha is teased for mutilating her natural hair by this Nigerian student who at the end of the play asks Beneatha to marry him and return to Africa. I'm sorry? That's 30, toss-up 17. Sports fans in this country believe the destruction of a Colonel Sanders statue in a 1985 post-game riot began an 18-year curse. The PA League and SAY League are both major sports leagues in this country overseen by the NPB. The finals of the first two World Baseball Classics were won by this country, where, yes,
Cuba.
Neg 5, where baseball is called Yakyu. For 10 points, what Asian country is home to the Yomiuri Giants and the Yokohama Bay Stars? Yes.
Japan.
10 bonus. This substance builds up in lysosomes in Niemann-Pick disease, type C, or NPC. For 10 points each, name the substance whose bad and good forms are called LDL and HDL, respectively. Answer.
Cholesterol.
NPC is often diagnosed by tagging cholesterol with philippin, which has this property, also possessed by cyber brand compounds.
Okay, I think
Okay, you can say it when he asks.
Answer.
fluorescence.
NPC disease often causes the enlargement of this organ, which also occurs through sequestration in sickle cell anemia.
It'd probably be the spleen.
Answer.
Okay, Spleen.
30. Toss-up 18. Getting to this location required traversing a river filled with scorpions, another filled with blood, and a third filled with pus. This location was ruled by 12 demonic lords led by Hunkame and Vukubkame. Those 12 gods were defeated in a ball game by Hunapu and Shablanke, the hero twins, and yes,
Underworld.
prompt.
Underworld of Aztec.
Neg 5. In a story from the Popol Vuh, for 10 points, name this underworld in Mayan mythology. Yes.
Hell.
Xibalba.
Sorry.
Toss-up 19. One discrepancy in the strength of this phenomenon is called the Bugway anomaly. Only the effects of this phenomenon and rotation are considered in determining the geoid. Chunks of lithosphere demonstrate isostasy, an equilibrium in which this phenomenon is balanced by buoyancy. At sea level, yes.
Pressure.
Nick 5. The acceleration due to this force is 9.8 meters per second per second. For 10 points, name this force exerted by the Earth. Yes.
Gravity.
For 10. The plan of Agua Prieta sought to oust this man from power. For 10 points each, name this Premier Jefe who followed Victoriano Huerta's interim successor, Francisco Carvajal, as president of Mexico in 1917.
We don't know, right? No.
Carranza. In 1918, Carranza threatened to destroy reserves of this resource in Tampico rather than allow the U.S. to seize it. Mexico nationalized this resource under the state-owned company Pemex.
It's not. I don't know. Oil.
Yes, this former general under Carranza effectively succeeded Carranza as president. He lost his right arm fighting against Pancho Villa.
I don't know. Juarez.
Obregon, 10 points, toss-up 20. This character describes all this marching up and down and cheering and waving flags as sex gone sour. This woman, who passes her future lover a secret note reading, I love you, wears a red sash signifying her, yes,
Julia.
15, bonus. Sammy laments that he looks like the enemy, so there's no way to climb any higher, in a song from this musical. For 10 points each, in this musical about Japanese-American internment, its songs include What Makes a Man and Wishes on the Wind.
No. It's. Shoot.
Answer.
Miss Saigon.
Allegiance, which was
Sorry.
inspired by the real-life experiences of this actor and LGBT advocate who portrayed Karu Sulu on the original series of Star Trek.
What's his name?
George Takei.
Yes.
George Takei.
Set phasers to stunning is a slogan for this Takei cologne, whose name is a play on Takei's two-word catchphrase.
What's his catchphrase? Do we have any idea?
Answer?
No.
Oh my. 10 points, toss-up 21. After the mutiny on the Bounty, Captain Bligh guided the cast-off boat to this island city of Kupang. O'Q's is an exclave on this island, the eastmost of the Lester Sunda Islands. The 1991 Santa Cruz massacre occurred in this island city of Dili, which in 2002, yes,
Java.
Neg 5, became the capital of a newly independent country. For 10 points, named this island divided between Indonesia and a namesake country in its east. Yes.
Borneo.
No, Timor. Timor.
Oh.
Toss-up 22. A key interaction in this philosophical process is known by the German word Aufheben, often translated as sublation. According to the science of logic, an instance of this process involving sein and nichts, or being and nothing, results in becoming. The phenomenology of spirit argues that historical development proceeds via, for 10 points, what process that G.F. Hegel articulated via, yes,
Like history.
Nick 5,
Oh, sorry.
articulated via the example of a master and slave. Yes.
Submission?
No, the dialectic.
Sorry.
Toss-up 23. This property can be estimated by repeated resampling to generate a rarefaction curve. This property can be measured by an index equivalent to the Shannon entropy. Richness and evenness are components of this property, which is high in so-called hotspots such as the Amazon rainforest. Conservation biologists seek to preserve high Yes.
Biodiversity.
For 10. Bonus, for 10 points each, answer the following about the fundamental theorems of welfare economics. The first fundamental theorem formalizes the concept of the invisible hand that this Scottish economist wrote about in The Wealth of
Smith.
Nations.
Smith.
The first and second fundamental theorems discuss the optimality named for this Italian economist, in which nobody can be better off without
Okay.
making somebody else worse off.
Pareto.
Yes, the first fundamental theorem fails in these models developed by Maurice Allais and Paul Samuelson, in which new groups of individuals arrive over time and experience young and old periods of life.
Okay.
Social network.
No, overlapping generations. 20 points on the bonus, and we'll get a final score. Final score is 120 for Middlesex County Academy, 320 for Macomb. Congratulations to both teams.
Hey guys, Jeremy's back with another post game here after our round 19 match. We had two 5-4 teams fighting for a playoff spot, and Macomb out of Illinois got the playoff spot. You guys have 6 wins. Congratulations. How was that match for you? Was it nerve-wracking? How'd you feel?
Very stressful.
Have you ever been in a situation like that where there's been such high stakes in a match?
Yeah, actually the last 2 years we went 5-5, so we had like a similar
So your last match the last 2 years you've been on the cusp, and third time's a charm. So what's the makeup of the team? You got seniors?
I'm the only
You're the only senior. Okay, but
These
you guys
guys are all at the last.
okay, but you guys have played together all year and last year as well, or?
I didn't. I'm a freshman.
Oh, got it. Okay, so what's your experience been like? This your first
It's
time
been
here?
a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. It's been cool to meet new people and to try a bunch of different food.
First time in Atlanta?
Yeah.
How are you liking it?
It's been really cool.
Very hot.
Yes.
So what have you guys been doing all season to prepare for this? Because I'm sure you guys have seen the fact that you've got 5-5 the past couple of years. You want to get over the hump this year. NAQT podcast. Yeah, make sure to check those out. What else?
Lots of flashcards, lots of protocols.
Crash course.
Tons of Wikipedia.
Well, congratulations, guys. Good luck in the playoffs. Hey, if you want to continue following us, go to NAQT on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or go to NAQT.com to check out all our content. And if you're here at the tournament, check out all our content. It's under the hashtag HSNCT. And if you've got pictures or video you want to share with us, share them with us using the hashtag. And we'll see you next time. Congratulations, guys.
Thank you.
Great job.